Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us at the UK User Group. My name's Leon Gordon, and I'm here with my co-host Pragati.
Hey everyone, how's everyone doing? Welcome to our today's session.
Excellent. How have you been today, Pragati?
Oh, good. My things are getting sorted at work, so yeah. When you deliver things on time, it always feels good, right? So I'm happy to do. Last session I was
Oh,
not
perfect.
happy, but today I'm happy.
Oh, excellent.
Great.
Well,
How it has been for you?
it's been good. Very busy, but it actually makes a change to be on this side of the camera this week. Obviously, have delivered the session last week,
Yeah,
so good to be back. Um,
great.
And if everybody that's joining us could let us know where you're joining us from, whereabouts in the world are you? Have you got glorious sunshine like we have in the UK? Just let us know in the chat, please. So, Pragati, one interesting thing about today's session, before we go into a bit of detail on our speaker, is our community group asked us if we could look at Power BI Datamarts specifically. Obviously, being a brand new preview feature, some people have had exposure to it and others haven't as of yet. So I think that we've been able to listen to the community
Exactly.
and deliver the session.
I think that's what we do, right? We get those kind of feedbacks and requests from attendees and even the user group members, and that's why we are here to bring that kind of content for them. So yeah, here guys,
Ex-
Data Marts is here for you today.
Excellent, and we're obviously in quite esteemed company as well because Greg Nash is a current Microsoft Data Platform MVP as well. So definitely very much looking forward to today's session. So please, everybody, do make this an interactive session. Feel free to ask questions throughout. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions, being as this is a brand new feature. So I'll just go and give you a bit of a brief background around Greg before we welcome him into today's session. So Greg Nash is a principal consultant for Dear Watson Consulting and has 20 plus years of technology operations experience across a range of industries. And more recently, Greg has been working heavily in the world of Power BI since its release in July 2015. So Greg, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. I know that it's very bright and breezy at the moment. Am I right in thinking it's 3 a.m. where you are currently?
Yes, 3 a.m. It's quite dark and a little bit cold.
Oh, well,
That's
like I say,
a great
thank you very
commitment.
much for taking the time out.
Yeah, thanks so much for getting up that early and delivering a session, especially on a topic like data marts.
Absolutely. Well, we have to spread the word about Datamarts and find out. I mean, a lot of people have got a lot of questions. It's a really interesting topic, and so yeah, I'm looking forward to today's session.
Excellent. Well, we won't hold you back anymore. We'll hand over to you for your session.
Good luck, Greg.
Great. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you, Leon. Thank you, Pragati. Thanks to everybody. Welcome, wherever you are, whenever you are. As they mentioned, I'm here in Melbourne, Australia. So it is 3 a.m. So I'm coming from tomorrow. Hey, there's someone from New Zealand here. Welcome, welcome. Everyone getting up early. I like to see it. I like to see it. 5 a.m. That's right. That's commitment. That's great commitment. As we mentioned, we're going to be talking about Power BI Datamarts today. As you can probably tell, since I'm Australian, I have a strange accent, and I also say a couple of the words strangely. I'm not sure whether to use data or data. I'm also not sure whether to say Azure or Azure. So there are a couple of things to look out for. If I have to say any of those words, I do interchange between them, so I apologize. And sometimes I say data mates accidentally, which I think is a good name for a podcast. Maybe we'll use it. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name's Greg Nash. I'm the principal consultant, as Leon said, at Dear Watson Consulting. You can find me pretty easily on LinkedIn. Power BI Unicorn is the only thing you need to search for. Also at Dashboard Doctor on Twitter. I also have a YouTube channel at Dashboard Doctor. And yeah, I've been working with Power BI since it came out. I was an early adopter, if you like. Got in the beta, discovered it, have been sort of working with, and like many of you, just when you find Power BI, you have that Power BI moment where you find the tool and love the tool. And so I've been working here in Australia doing consulting for the last 7 years or so. Let's get into today's topic. I want to get into it as quickly as possible because we've got such a reasonable amount of content to kind of get through. Also, there's a lot of questions I'm sure you'll have. Datamarts is a preview feature. We don't know I probably won't have all of the answers to your questions right now. We'll answer as many as we can, and I'm sure Leon and Pragati will jump in on the chat as well if they have some answers, and we can look some things up. I'd subscribe to the Datamates. Thank you, Ricky. Awesome. So what we're going to talk about today is Datamarts or Datamarts. We're going to do the introduction. We're going to talk what is a Datamart. I think this is one of the really key topics that I want to kind of dig into today is where does it fit in the ecosystem? Where should I use Datamarts? What do you mean by Datamart? What's the definition of a Datamart, if you like? We'll have a look at the architecture. We'll have a look at the underlying technologies a little bit. Then a when should I use it type thing. Then we'll have a look. We'll go in. We'll build a Datamart. We'll create some stuff. We'll do as much as we can. Let's play around with these preview features. This is the kind of the idea we want to get in. I'll show you how you can get started with your own Datamart, and then I'll give you a couple of resources at the end. As I mentioned, if you've got any questions, and I've already mentioned that I can see the chat, so feel free to drop a question in the chat, drop a comment, anything like that. I like to have an interactive session. It'd be great to get your feedback on your experience with Datamarts. I know a lot of people have a lot of thoughts about Datamarts, and so feel free to share those. It'd be great to see you interacting with this session. Okay, so the Power BI Datamart. So it's been really interesting to see the community feedback and the community commentary around Datamart since it was kind of announced I think it was announced at Build, I think. And so it's been about a month now of sort of Datamarts, people sort of trying to get their head around Datamarts. I think you kind of fall into two camps. You either fall into the Datamart is the most revolutionary thing that's ever happened to Power BI and it's going to be amazing camp. And then there's the, I don't understand Datamarts. I don't see any point for them existing. Why don't we just use a SQL server? This seems strange to me camp, right? So there's two kind of camps that you could fall into in the Datamart world. I'm not sure if I've met anybody in the middle yet. Reza did a really early, so for those of you who don't know who Reza Rad is, he runs a site called Radicard, which is his blog. He falls into the this is a massive feature camp, right? And he did a blog on Sunday. So he said Power BI Datamart is more than just another feature. It's a major milestone where the development of Power BI solutions will be revolutionized. So they're big words, right? People are saying that this is a huge step forward in the Power BI ecosystem. And so let's have a look at that. Let's see why we think that. And we know Microsoft has invested a lot of time and effort into this development of this. And so let's have a look at Datamarts as a technology itself. So what is a Datamart? What do we mean by Datamarts when we say that? I think the most interesting place to begin when we talk about the concept of a Datamart is to take it back to the very original kind of the thing that many people in the data warehousing world will know and love. A lot of basically where star schemas come from, and that's the data warehouse toolkit by somebody called Ralph Kimball and Margie Ross. Let's not forget Margie, but Ralph Kimball, everybody talks about Kimball, right? And Kimball talks about Datamarts in the data warehouse toolkit all the way back then when they kind of wrote that this original sort of conceptualization of star schemas. And so he talks about Datamart architecture being departmental sort of section independent Datamarts, so independent models that are broken up by department. So basically your BI applications for department 1 have their own set of data or their own star schema. Your BI applications for department 2 have their own star schema. BI application for department 3 has their own star schema. So you've got this kind of idea of building an individual kind of mart for every department in your organization. And it's the reason why I'm sort of focusing on that word department is because of that idea, is because that's really how this idea is architected, right? It's around departmental data. So it's not talking about your full enterprise operational data store, for example. We're talking about really at that departmental data. Don't forget in1 as well. So yes, people are saying, what about in1? So that's really that's probably the first kind of some of the earlier mentionings of Datamarts. So Kimball, in his book, he says it mirrors the way that organizations fund IT projects. It requires zero cross-organizational data governance and coordination. So you're less reliant on cross-organizational data sort of governance pieces. It's the path of least resistance for fast development at relatively low cost, at least in the short run. So that sounds kind of positive, but Kimball actually has some words to say about Datamarts a little bit later that we'll talk about as well. I'm not sure that he agreed that the Datamart architecture was the best architecture when it comes to building out your sort of data warehousing solutions. But then we also have to look at this through the lens of that Kimball kind of wrote this book a while ago, and that some of the technologies available to them at the time are more available to us now, and so we need to think about that. So to really kind of put Datamarts into context, let's have a look at kind of a basic, kind of BI development process, if you like. And so, here on the left, we start with a sort of extract. We do our load, we transform, we model, we visualize and share. So this is kind of a general kind of BI value stream, if you like. We have to extract data somewhere, we have to load it somewhere, we have to transform it. You notice I put load before transform, but we'll swap that around for the next slide for a particular reason. But let's talk about some of the different architectures that you might have in your organization coming into this kind of Datamart architecture, right? So the first thing is you might have like what I'd call a traditional data warehouse architecture. That's where you're doing extract, transform, and load inside maybe SQL, or you might use analysis services, all the way up to kind of modeling. And then on the other side, on the modeling side, you're going to be bringing Power BI in to potentially either do modeling or just visualize and share your data. So that's your BI tool of choice. So that's kind of a lot of people who use Power BI will fall into this camp of, your traditional kind of data warehouse architecture. And this is an architecture that tons and tons of organizations have. They're thinking about this, and then they're saying, well, how does Datamarts fit into this architecture? And I think this is a really interesting kind of lens to look at it through. Another architecture you might use is some kind of like slightly more modern, maybe lakehouse architecture. Maybe you're pulling all of your data into a data lake. Out of that data lake, you might run Databricks, Datalake over the top of that. You might have a SQL front end that presents the data to your BI users, and then you present it to Power BI, right? And that would be like a lakehouse kind of data architecture. And so people who have this architecture are thinking like, well, where does Datamarts fit into this architecture? And so these are kind of, this is where I think the confusion and the kind of I think there's a hesitancy towards Datamarts. Where does it kind of fit into my data architectures? And particularly these previous two data architectures are very sort of back-end heavy. You might have a BI team who looks after SQL, looks after analysis services. You've got data engineers who are looking after your data lake. Those situations, like, do we give the data mart to them to be able to manage? What is this, an IT-owned thing, or is it something else? And so we need to be able to put this into context. So then other organizations, and these are people who have maybe adopted Power BI slightly earlier, or they've gone all in on the Power BI world. They use this concept of what we call a golden dataset architecture. And so some of you will have seen lots of content about this from different Power BI people, where they say, well, your data can be, you can do your extract and load steps in your SQL or in your data lake. It doesn't really matter. Then we pull that data out and we put it into a golden data set via, we build a Power BI file. We go into Power BI desktop, we build a model that's a golden model. We publish that to the Power BI service. And then we use a second Power BI file to reference that Power BI file and create visualizations and share those data on top of that. So we've got a central PBIX file and then multiple PBIX files sitting on top of that. So that's kind of what I would call a golden data set architecture, right? And so there's some people have kind of gotten to this, and you can see we're moving more and more into the Power BI world. There's less and less SQL or Lake and more Power BI as we go into these kind of more sort of recent Power BI architectures, I would call that. You can kind of go with this model. And a lot of organizations have kind of adopted this model. And then there's organizations who have completely adopted Power BI as their kind of main ETL tool as well. So they might have a data flow that connects directly to their source systems, extracts data, loads it, transforms it, and then you build a golden data set on top of that. So if you've got data flows, if you're using heavily invested in data flows, and you've got golden data sets as well, you're in a situation where you're almost all in on the Power BI kind of ecosystem, and you're using Power BI across your whole thing, your whole infrastructure. Now, how large is an organization that does this kind of architecture would be really interesting to know. There are a couple, I know with our last session, so we ran this session at the Melbourne meetup, there was a lot of, there was a couple of very large organizations that are running these type of golden data set architectures. Very, very large organizations, from an Australian perspective anyway. I'm not sure if they're large by a UK perspective, but they would, and they've gone all in on the BI, on this, call it Power BI ecosystem, where they've created this kind of self-service infrastructure. So which of those kind of camps do you fall into? Or do you fall into some other camp that I haven't mentioned yet? And if that's the case, then please put it in the chat, because I'd be interested to know where people are coming from when it comes to Datamarts. I think it matters a lot what your current architecture is, depending on the way that whether you'll use this feature at all or not. So I think the thing we need to really think about here is that if you're doing this kind of golden data set, if you're all in on the Power BI side of the world, you're very focused on self-service BI. So there's two kinds of BI, right? You've got the two general camps of BI. You've got the corporate BI and you've got self-service business-led BI, right? So they're the two, and then you've got the middle sort of thing, which is a mix of those two. So corporate BI being enterprise driven, and you've got IT and BI teams who run large back-end infrastructures to be able to serve your data up to your customers and to your end users via a centrally controlled, heavily governed, highly regulated central area. And then you've got sort of business-led self-service BI. Business-led self-service BI being it's business-led. The data is democratized. People can, different departments can access different areas of the data, and they can build their own models. They can extract their own data from source systems. And, neither of these two things are perfect. The corporate BI is too restrictive, and business, there's a lot of knocking on the door from the business saying we need more access to data. We need to be more agile. If you do just business-led BI, then you have a sprawl, you have a problem with all of data being everywhere and being able to access data is maybe easy, but maybe it's affecting your downstream systems. There's lots of problems on the business-led BI, so you're trying to find this balance between the two. But this concept of self-service BI is very much the way that Power BI is kind of built and is architected, right? That's the way Microsoft market it to you and to everybody else. They say we're trying to build end user BI. They use this concept of end user BI. Everyone should have access. We're trying to empower your employees to create stuff for themselves. And so Microsoft is very much pushing this concept of a self-service BI architecture. And when you start to realize that this is a self-service tool and that you're coming from through that self-service lens, then Datamart starts to make a little more sense. If you're coming from the corporate BI, centralized architecture kind of world, you'll be wondering a lot about why Datamarts exist at all. There's an interesting comment here from Sasha saying she uses Dataflow and Golden Dataset, but complement that with a lakehouse using Databricks and Snowflake. Yeah, so Dataflow is for self-service, recyclability of artifacts. So that's a really, really great example of where a lot of organizations are at now. Like they're using a mixture of these traditional kind of data warehousing, data lake housing, back-end infrastructures, and some of these newer Power BI infrastructures for this kind of self-service data flow. Makes it nice and easy, makes it kind of simple for users to be able to do that. So when Microsoft talk about Datamarts, they say, well, this is now fits in this kind of the golden data set architecture, right? And what is a Datamart? It's a fully managed Azure SQL database in the cloud that is now part of the Power BI ecosystem. The fact that, and this concept of it being a fully managed SQL database is really, really key to understand. So it's SQL, it's bringing Power BI into Power BI, a SQL database, right? That's the simplest kind of way to describe what a data mart is. It's a SQL database in the cloud that you can use. It has a data set attached to it that gets auto-generated, and you can see that from the image there. It's a bit of a kind of a black box. You can't really see into the back end of how this SQL is being built. In fact, even the MVPs aren't really sure what's the back end architecture of Datamarts. Are they using serverless SQL with a Spark backend, or are they actually spinning up an Azure SQL, kind of a SQL database to be able to surface this data up? So there's a little bit of mystery in terms of what Datamarts actually are and how you can interact with them. Around what is the actual thing that's serving this up. But for all intents and purposes, from a sort of business-led kind of view, that's all we need to know. We're spinning up an Azure SQL database. So when we did data flows, which is obviously the other kind of ETL tool that we use, and we use data flows in Datamarts as well, so Power Query in the cloud. We use our data flow, we go and get some data, we bring that into the Power BI service. When we use a data flow, it actually lands our data into an Azure SQL datalake Gen 2 instance. So it basically lands it as most likely some kind of CSV file, or maybe Parquet, or maybe Delta format. I'm not 100%, I can't remember which format they actually landed in, might be something different. So they're landing that data as flat files in an Azure datalake Gen 2, right? So now if we use Datamarts and we bring data flows in to bring into Datamarts, it will land that data into a SQL instance that is now accessible from other SQL tools, and we can interact with via our kind of traditional SQL, whatever we use to access SQL. So we can use SSMS, we can use Azure Data Studio, we can use these other SQL tools to access the Datamart layer as well. So now we're bringing this kind of concept of SQL, and so into our architecture. Now, Kimball talked about Datamarts, and he kind of said, well, Datamarts aren't the best way to do things, we don't think, because the concepts of dimension. So Kimball sort of said, well, our concepts of dimensional modeling, so star schemas, are often applied in this architecture, despite the complete disregard for some of our core tenets, such as focusing on atomic details, building by business process instead of department, and I'm going to come back to that because that's really important to me, and leveraging conformed dimensions for enterprise consistency and integration, right? So let's talk about the conformed dimensions first. So in our Datamart architecture, if the marketing department has their own models, or they build their own Datamart, and then they have the customer view, and then the finance department, they build their own Datamart, and they build a customer dimension, which is the source of truth, right? So that's kind of what Kimball's talking about there. Conforming dimensions across the whole enterprise is going to be a problem if we break them all up into Datamarts. How do we make sure we can do that? So we need to think about the potential impact of these types of things. And we get that with Power BI dataset sprawl when we're using golden dataset architectures, right? People build their own Power BI datasets. And so how do we keep them all conformed? How do we make sure that there's consistency across the enterprise? And this is why the centralized BI people are going, we don't want to have anything to do with this architecture because we can't control it well enough, you know? I think the really key thing that's maybe the sticking point a little bit for me at the moment is this concept of building departmental data silos, right? I am an advocate for building my Power BI models, so my PBIX files. I'm gonna recommend, because this is what Kimball recommended, if you're building a star schema, you should build it by business process, right? So if you've got HR data, you're gonna have, HR has many business processes, right? They're gonna have maybe your sort of hire to retire process, you know, so you might have a star schema that covers all of the data associated with that process. You're going to have different processes that maybe around time management or something like that. And so that's going to have a star schema that's associated with that. And the reason why is business context is really important with data modeling. And when you've done data modeling in Power BI and build a lot of star schemas, you start to really understand how important this is. You can get what I call context lock in a data model, right? You can have you can be building a data model and someone can ask you a question, and you can ask another question of that data model that doesn't support you. Maybe you've got a particular two-way relationship, for example, between products and customers and and the product customer fact table, right? Like the invoices or sales orders or whatever. You could ask one question. Maybe you want to know the number of customers that bought this product. So you're running a filter down through into your fact and then back up to your customers table this way. You're using a two-way relationship between customers and your fact table, right? Now, if you ask, well, then the opposite of that, and you create a circular relationship, then you have an issue where you're locking your model. You can only ask one way or the other way. I hope that makes sense to people who are kind of doing dimensional modeling in Power BI. You sometimes run into these situations where you can't ask the same question both ways. You need to have one or the other. The thing that you can do that's usually when your model transfers or is going across multiple business processes. So one process has your model setting it one way, and then your other process asks that question another way, because one is focused on one area and another is focused on another area. So these kind of modeling data in a way that works. I always say, well, when I build my PBIX files or I build Power BI, I want to build them by business process. That's the most efficient way that I've found so far to be able to get all of that in the same context and then build a model that flows through nicely and makes sense, and you can have all of your data together. So having a departmental silo, what is the impact of that? We need to think about that fairly carefully in terms of implementing Datamarts in this way. So I think Datamarts would be great if we implement them from by business process. I'm not sure I can see whether the departmental thing will work yet. So when we look at the actual Datamarts, we can talk about that.
Thank you for that, Greg. We do have a couple of questions coming in, so I hope you don't mind me just jumping in.
Yeah.
So our first question coming in from EMAC, and they ask, do we still need a data warehouse for self-service BI?
Well, that's a great question. Does Datamarts replace the data warehouse? So I think, and we'll talk about this maybe a little bit when we talk about it, is that maybe for smaller organizations, the Datamart can be the data warehouse, right? Because what else do you need in your data warehouse? And the concept of this being fully managed and the fact that it's already optimized, it would depend heavily on how much SQL you kind of have, and then what is your definition of a data warehouse? Because I think that's changing with data lake house architectures, right? So where does that kind of fit into your architecture? Modern architecture, data warehouses are needed. So maybe you have your data lake and then you're surfacing that up through Databricks, and then you put that into a datamart, right? And then that sort of acts as your data warehouse. And for smaller organizations, that's all you need. And it's part of the service, right? So yeah, it's a really interesting question. Do we still need the data warehouse? I think probably yes, but I don't know, because, and this, like I said, we lose some visibility of the SQL client side. And we'll talk a lot about that when I go into my demo. But yeah, that is the question for sure.
Fantastic. Thanks, Greg. And then Pragati, we just have another question coming in now as well.
Yeah, I think this is from Fernando, and he's asking, like, Datamart's main focus is self-service. So is that correct? Or Datamarts can be used in some other way as well?
Absolutely. I think the early word is that this is definitely a self-service. The main focus is around enabling your business users to self-serve their own data warehouse, if you like, or Datamart. They can build their own stuff for sure.
Excellent. Thank you, Greg. That's all the questions for now.
Awesome. Thanks for your questions, guys. Keep them coming in. Okay, so we've got a bit of an idea of kind of what a Datamart is, I guess, so when do we need to be using this Datamart? So the Microsoft's documentation says that business users rely heavily on centrally governed data sources. They're built by information technology teams. So they're talking about centralized BI here, right? But when it takes months for IT to make a change in any given data source, that causes frustration for the business. Okay, and in heavily regulated, heavily centralized IT environments in large enterprises, which is typically where Microsoft kind of, that's their main audience, if you like, they're hearing this frustration from their business users. Business users want to be able to take action more quickly than IT can kind of do, because ITs can only handle so much and they're doing other things. They're worried about keeping the lights on and that kind of stuff. Datamarts are targeted towards interactive data workloads for self-service scenarios. So answering that question from before. For example, if you're working in accounting or finance, you can build your own data models and collections. So they're very, very much saying that this is a self-service tool. So here we are in our data flow with our golden data set, this kind of architecture that sits, that we're kind of the modern Power BI architecture. I'm not sure what you would really call this. So Datamarts fits right in the middle here. Basically, you're going to be loading data into Datamarts. You might be using a data flow to extract that data out. Datamarts and data flows have this weird kind of interaction between the two of them. We'll look at that in the demo. It's strange. They kind of have, there's a half of the data flow in one part of a Datamart, and then there's another one. And then so you'll basically remove that centralized PBIX file that you have as your golden data set right now. That's where the Datamart will probably live in your heavily self-service BI environment. So I think that's the place that makes most sense. That seems to be the consensus for where people are thinking Datamarts make the most sense to fit. So if you're running a golden data set architecture, consider using Datamarts to replace that data set that lives in that first PBIX file you create, your data model PBIX file. So that raises the question of, well, isn't there all this stuff that I can do in Power BI Desktop that I can't do in Datamarts right now? And why would I move to that? And I think that is a really interesting question. And I think Microsoft will answer that question over the coming months as they release more features for Datamarts. This is, remember, still in preview, and knowing the rapid pace at which Power BI updates, for those of you who've been working in the industry and working with Power BI for a while, you know that it's a full-time job just keeping up with all of these features. I'm sure we'll see a lot of progress, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the future of that soon. So Datamarts are going to fit here in our self-service BI. They're going to fit right here in the middle. So what do you get when you get a Datamart? Well, you get 100%. It's 100% web-based, which is, they're saying, well, now it's time Mac users can model data, right? That's something that a Mac user couldn't do before, which opens up another audience for Power BI potentially. I have had Mac users complaining about, where is our Power BI Desktop? Why can't we get Power BI Desktop? Well, now you've got a situation where you're getting the ability to model data in the web. And Power BI did announce the Power Platform roadmap so the next set of tools for Power Platform was announced the other day, and they announced that there would be web-based Power BI dataset measure creation, and all of that kind of stuff is coming to the web interface, right? So it's not just in Datamarts. You'll be able to do it with your other Power BI datasets as well. You're going to be able to edit these models in the web. You're going to change your relationships. You're going to be able to create measures, all that kind of stuff. You can't create calculated columns yet, and you can't create calculated tables yet. It'd be interesting to see where that goes, because if you've got SQL, do you need calculated columns? We can talk about that. It's a no-code experience, resulting in a fully managed Datamart. And fully managed, I think the most compelling thing I think about Datamarts at the moment, from the fully managed perspective, is the optimization of query performance is really surprisingly good in Datamarts. You can get pretty good performance out of a Datamart. And I think that's a little scary for people who manage SQL servers at the moment, because they're like, well, you've just kind of abstracted all of the things we do that make us useful, which is we spin up SQL servers and we make them work faster, right? Microsoft are doing this as a no-code experience now, so something to think about. Performance tuning, we just kind of spoke about that. It's tuning it for you. It's making your queries more optimized. Those queries are going to work fast, and you don't do anything. It's self-service. There's that kind of thing. A built-in visual and SQL query editor for ad hoc analysis. I'll show you that in the demo. Support for SQL and other popular client tools. So you can access it with whatever you like. Toad, whatever. What's your favorite SQL? Put in the chat what your favorite SQL management tool is. Native integration with Power BI, Microsoft Office, and other Microsoft Analytics offerings. This integration story is going to be an interesting one as well, especially when you think about it from the Power Platform perspective. And how does this kind of work? Wait, does that mean we've got a SQL database now that sits at the back of our data flows, for example, right? So now I can build a data flow, pull data out of it, And then I can create a Power App that sits on top of this SQL database and writes data back into it. Wait, did someone say write back? Is write back coming to Power BI? That's a question. SSMS. Someone said SSMS, of course. Included with Power BI premium capacities and premium per user. So it's a premium feature. I don't think anyone's too surprised by that. Premium per user, though, is interesting. So wait, I can have one user and then I get a 100 gig database that is optimized and fully managed. How is Datamarts going to be priced when it comes out to GA? No one knows. So that's a question as well. So I wouldn't rush this into production anytime soon, guys. This is a preview feature. We need to see some more information about what it's going to be right yet. Okay, we made it to the demo. This is amazing. Everyone said SSMS so far, it looked like. I'm going to make sure that I can, there's Brigadi, yep. I'm going to make sure I can show my screen. Hopefully that is coming through. Yes, it is. So here we are in Power BI. We're just going to go to the home. Here I am in my home screen. You can see I've got a couple of Datamart demos going here. If you go here, you might notice now it's called the Data Hub. This used to be called something else. It's now called the Data Hub because we can have our data sets and our data marts and our data flows and all that kind of stuff. I've got a workspace here. It's called Datamart Demo. It is a premium per user workspace. I am on a PPU trial with this account. You can do this on PPU trial. So if you want to go and play with Datamarts, you can absolutely do it with a trial on your premium per user. If you're in a premium world and you want to do this, I recommend that you spin up a PPU user to do this rather than use your existing premium capacity. Datamarts will consume some of your premium capacity, yeah? And so if you're just playing around with this as a preview feature, spin it up in a PPU instance or do a PPU trial and then use it there rather than consuming pieces of your premium capacity. I think that's a sensible thing to do. We don't really know what the impact of Datamarts is on our capacities yet and how much of that will be consumed by Datamarts. And so I'd be careful about implementing a preview feature and using your existing premium capacity if you're using that. So something to be do that. Okay, so I've got a literally just a very simple premium capacity. You can see I've already created some data marts in this premium workflow workspace. Apologies. So if I click here on data sets and data flows, now here's an interesting thing that I found just earlier. Actually, if I go to create a data flow, so I'm like, oh, I want to create a data flow in my workspace. It says, hey, do you want to create a data mart instead? So that's interesting, isn't it? They're like, why don't you use data marts instead of data flows? What are you saying, Microsoft? Don't you like data flows? No, so maybe they're just trying to promote the feature here. But like if I want to land my data into my ADLS Gen 2, I want to use a data flow. I don't want to use data marts. But yes, I want to create a data mart this time. So that was interesting, wasn't it? Like they say, and if I just cancel it, it creates a data flow. So there you go. All right, so let's create a data mart. So you say new, here's data mart. See, I say data mart and data mart. Okay. We create a data mart. And so what this will do is it goes and spins up a SQL instance for us in the back end. Hooray. Here's my data mart. So I have to go and get some data. I found there's some really great samples, and I've got the link to the samples. One of the sample data sets that you can get, I don't know if anyone uses this data set much, but one of the interesting data sets you can get is an OData feed, the Northwind OData feed. Does anyone ever use this? So you can literally just set up an OData service. You could do this with Power BI Desktop. And you go to this link here, which is services. I don't have my Zoom. Sorry, I can't zoom in. But that says services.odata.org Northwind. And I'm just going to do an anonymous connection to it. Hopefully this will work. The demo gods. Okay, and so now we can choose some data. So just like data flows, this is very similar to the data flow experience for connecting to data sets. So let's bring some stuff in. We'll bring in some invoices, some orders, some products, some customers, some employees. Hopefully that's enough. Categories. We brought products in, didn't we? Yes. regions. Let's bring in regions. Okay, so we'll hit transform. So they've highlighted they highlight the transform data button these days. I like it. So this experience here, very similar to your existing data flow experience, with a couple of weird little caveats. There's some stuff here I'm not sure if this is exactly the same as Power Query, as the data flow experience, but it's very, very similar. So I've just brought in a bunch of queries. It's going away and getting those OData feeds. Here's all our data coming in. It's looking nice and quick, which is great. That's a great little sample service to be able to build a data set on. So I've got all of my data. Obviously, this is fairly nice and clean data, so we don't have to do much transformations, but we can do our transformations here. So just like data flows, you can add columns, you can split your column, you can detect your data types, you can pivot. There's this new thing which says mark as key. That's interesting, right? So do we mark that as the primary key of a table? So notice this one's got a little key next to it. Oh, there's that OData link. Thank you. Thanks for that, guys. We've also got this little ability to extend join tables as well, just like you'd see. So you can kind of do all of that stuff that you want to do to transform this data as we come in as a part of our ingest sort of steps, I guess. Let's save this datamart now. So when you kind of finish your Power Query part, it goes away and gets the data, right? And you get this kind of experience. This is different that you would see in data flows. This is new, right? You get Power Query processing, it creates some relationships, it does a data load, and it goes and loads the data. I can actually go out of this and come back in and see what it's going thing. So I can just click go to workspace if I want to. We'll wait for it to load. It's not a very big data set, so it won't take long to load. Assuming that the service doesn't do me dirty here. Can't really see text in the video. Yeah, okay, I'll see if I can get some Zoom It stuff installed. Do I have Zoom It installed on this machine? No, I don't. Apologies. Let me do a bit of zooming. Okay. Okay, so we have this kind of experience now in our data sets, and I've zoomed in a little bit, but it's basically the same. So you can get some more data. We've got some tables here. You can see some tables. So this is our datamart experience, if you like. There's a button that says incremental refresh on a table, which is interesting. We can transform some data, so we can go back into our Power Query if you like. There's the title of our datamart here at the top. So I can go to the top here and say new datamart. Happy face. No, we won't put happy face. Okay. So we can rename it there, nice and simple. I can create a new measure and I can manage row level security. So that's some interesting things. And then we're missing just a little bit at the end because I zoomed out is the view as part of row level security. There we go. We've got our table view here, and then we've got these icons down the bottom as well, right? So we've got this thing that's called the Visual Query Editor. We've got this one, which is SQL, and then we've got this one, which is model. So let's have a look at the model. Now this looks familiar. Let's zoom in. This is our modeling experience, right? And this is pretty much the same as you would get in Power BI Desktop. You can create your relationships. It looks like it's already automatically discovered some relationships between customers and employees and orders. So let's use that as our kind of sample model, if you like. I'll just zoom out just a touch so we can see that. I come from the school of small dimension tables and big fact tables. Shout out to everybody who does small dimension tables and big fact tables. I love this kind of way of modeling. There we go. And I also like to make my dimension tables flow down into my fact tables. Does anyone else do that? You got to make them flow down. All right. We've got some properties here that we can collect. Notice the storage mode is direct query on all of these tables as well, which is kind of interesting. We've got our products table over here. There's a categories dimension that sits on top. Small dimension, big fact. Let's do that. I'm sure there's a relationship between our products and our orders, surely. Is there a product ID? Maybe not. No, because it's probably in order lines, right? So it's at a different grain. So that's not a fact, that's a dimension. This is snowflake now, all right? Anyway, I won't get caught up in modeling. Okay, we've got some invoices and we've got some regions. We've kind of got it. It's not a very well put together data mart, I will admit, but we're just doing a demo. You get the idea. One of the things that we can do in our thing here, not much, not a lot of properties available to us. We can change the relationships though. Is Power BI Desktop in the cloud? Jose says, yes, that is very close to what we're getting now. So it's this is what we're talking about. We're now getting the Power BI Desktop experience. We're starting to get this in the cloud. So what else can we do with things? We can create a new measure on a table. So let's create a quick measure. We say a new measure, and we can write some DAX. So what are we going to say? We're going to say got the sum of the freight. Is there anything else we can? Oh, it's good that I can interact with this while I'm doing it. What is our invoice? We've got a total amount or something like that. Total quantity, total unit price. Okay. We can create total quantity equals, and then the sum of the quantity. What did we say? Orders quantity, invoices quantity. So it's very similar to your modeling, like your measure building experience in the cloud as it is now. Hit OK on that one, and I get a total quantity measure here now that's available in my model. So I can build measures. I can't build calculated columns. There's no way to do that. Can't build a column. Can't right-click new column. I can new measure, no new column. Can't build a calculated table yet. But I've got a SQL instance, so maybe I don't need to. Maybe I do that in SQL. So that's an interesting idea. I can enter data. In creating measures, so there's a comment here from Fernando. Creating measures, in my opinion, is a little tricky because if you connect a blank data set to the database, you lose them. Yeah, there is some weird things about data. Rather create them in the data set and then create connected to the data mart. Right. So you create data mart first, then you connect a data set to it, then you create your measures in the data set. Why? Because it's easier to do in Power BI Desktop. I agree with that. So yeah, interesting, right? This whole experience in the cloud is not yet 100% perfect, I would say. They're going to be working on this, I'm sure, making it a little bit better. But we can go and get some data. We can bring it into our data mart. We can define those relationships. We can create a measure. We can set row-level security roles. Yeah, so we can assign row-level security roles to particular people. Notice you can create them and assign them in the same interface now because you don't have to do it in desktop and then go into the cloud and assign them, right? You can do it all in one, which is kind of useful. So that's nice. And then you can view your model as a particular role. Okay, so I skipped over a couple of things. There's this visual query editor. Let me say that this is janky at best. In my experience, I actually can't get this to save a query at the moment. I'm not sure if this is a bug in the system. I have to get into the product team and find out what's going on with it. So this now brings into kind of view this is like data flows again. You know how you have the visual view of data flows? It's kind of cool where we can bring in a couple of tables. So this is like creating a view, I think, if you like. So we're creating a view. Let's do a view on categories and products. They seem like they would fit together. And maybe, so products is already here. So maybe we don't need to do that, but we could do it. Let's do it anyway. So we can merge these two based on probably there's a category ID in products. Hopefully there's a category ID. So let's merge on those two. So we can do a join from products to category on the category ID. So there's category ID to category ID. It gives me a nice join. What we should be able to do as well is select the join kind. So we can choose which type of join. We can use fuzzy matching just like we do in Power Query. And we can bring that up and then it does this kind of stuff, gives us this visual view of what we can do next in terms of doing that. So maybe we want to remove some other columns. So now we've only got the category columns. Well, I want to change that because I always like to tick the columns I want. So maybe I'm going to bring this one. Let's get rid of the IDs. We'll bring just the product ID, the name, and then we'll bring the categories in. Then we'll expand this out, and we'll only bring the category name and the description. Okay, and then this is our final view, if you like. So it's kind of like a visual view kind of editor. Now, what should happen here is that I should get a queries thing down the bottom here, and it doesn't kind of work for me. Visual query is similar to Tableau. So that's from specifically when tables are joined with a join type. Yeah, so thanks, Brigada, yeah. So you have a bunch of different you have this kind of visual kind of query thing, but you don't get, I can't save this query anywhere. So I think I'm not sure what's going on with that. So it's a bit janky. I find this quite awkward to use, the visual query editor. I also, when I click on View SQL, it doesn't do anything. See, look, nothing. So let me know if that works for you, because it doesn't work for me and I want to see the SQL. But if I do want to write some SQL against my data set, I can do that. And this is where we use the SQL view. So let's have a look at that. So this is SQL. This is like select. It gives me select top. I can just say select star. Why not? From, and then we'll say orders. Now, this is every time I do this. This is the one thing that I don't know what they're going to do, because if I want to write SQL, anybody, I'm not sure how many of you do this, but surely it's a good portion. What's the first key that you press after you write a piece of SQL? It's F5, right? Well, I'll show you what happens when you hit F5, because I literally do it every time. You hit F5 and it completely destroys your SQL query. So don't write a long SQL query and then press F5. You have to get out of the habit of pressing F5, because F5 has two functions in life. It's to run your SQL and it's to refresh your browser. And I'm afraid refresh browser might take precedence over run SQL in this case. So yeah, what do? F5. Don't forget about the F5 thing. Okay, select star from orders. Okay, and I'm just going to run that. I have to remember don't hit F5. Don't hit F5. Got to hit it. Okay. Does Control E work? That's a good question. Let's try that. And here's my query, and I can open this in Excel, and it'll do a SQL connector into Excel as well. Let's click that button and see what happens. It downloads an Excel SX here. Here it is. Look at that. I wonder what happens when I click Open File. It'll open it on this other screen. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Excel's just opening. It gave me a thing saying, do you want to run this native database query against this database? We'll talk about this string in a second. And then it asked me for my credentials, my Microsoft credentials, like this. And it basically just creates a Power Query that connects you into Excel. This is happening on my Excel screen. Sorry, it's on another screen. So that's what happens. It'll just create a Power Query that joins you into that SQL database. Let's try Control E. Does Control E work? Let's create a new query. Select from categories. And I want to be able to drag it in as well. I can't do that. Okay, categories. Oh, I almost hit F5. That's how often I do it. Okay, we're going to do Control E. Control E. No, it doesn't work. Control E is your search. Yeah, there you go. Okay. I use Control E to run queries from SSMS. Okay, a lot of people use Control E. Okay, great. Yeah, so Control E doesn't work either. Sorry to tell you. So I don't know what to do. But you have to hit the run button. So we'll feed that back to the product team. I'm sure they already know about it. But yeah, F5. But there you go. You can run SQL queries directly against it, because why? We've got a SQL database that is servicing all of this up. This is also automatically creating a data set in the background. So you get your database and your data set sitting together in the one area. And you'll see that when we go back into our Datamart demo, we look at our new data set and data flows, and then Datamarts, right? So we've got a data set that's called Datamart demo, and we've got a Datamart called Datamart demo. So data set is created as well. So if I go open my Power BI, I can connect directly to this data set, just like I would any other Power BI data set using Live Connect. How are we going for time? We're going okay. a couple of things that I wanted to show you as well. We've created our datamart. If you want to get access to the datamart connection string, so you go here to settings. Hopefully I can get there. Under Datamarts, which is over here on the right, I've got Datamart selected. I'm zoomed in a little bit. You can see you've got your Datamart, and then you click here for your connection string. There you go. I can copy this now. I can open Azure Data Studio. I can connect to a new connection and put the server in. Sorry, it's probably a bit small. The authentication is Azure Active Directory Universal with NFA support only. It doesn't support Windows or SQL login yet. I don't know if you can do even SQL. I don't think you can do any SQL security stuff in the back end, but we can connect to it. You can connect it with SSMS or your favorite tool. See if it will work for us. Might be the wrong Azure AD tenant. Oh no, it seemed to work. Create a new query. Select star from orders. F5. Now I can hit F5. Orders wasn't it? Did that not? Let's see what it's got here. So we can see this database. We look in tables, there's nothing, but if you look in views, this is trip data. I'm connecting to a different data set, sorry. Let's do a select SOP 1000 on this one. There we go. And F5. See, I always hit F5. And there you go. This is a different data mart, but we're going and getting data from that data mart. So we get this really long and weird looking connection string. I'll just go back into the thing. So you get this giant, that's not even a GUID, right? That is a massive connection string that's associated with your data mart. You can set up scheduled refresh here. You can do your query caching. You can do lots of different bits and pieces. So you've got some basic kind of data mart settings and things like that. So that's a lot of the demo for data marts, creating a data mart, getting set up, creating the relationships for a data mart, doing all of the things that you would want to be doing in data marts. If you need to, now, when we talk about analyzing and understanding the back end of data marts, I think that's where there's a few blockers here. If you're a SQL person, you're going to hate data marts right now. It's a black box. You don't have any of the auditing tools, like you can't see which users made changes, all that kind of thing. So that's something to keep an eye out for. So your SQL DB admins are really not going to be happy with data marts because they're fully managed and they're optimized, but their query performance is quite good. And a few people, I'll give you some resources, have done some a little bit of query analysis on data marts, and they're finding the actual query performance is quite good in data marts. So that optimization does seem to be working. Microsoft know what they're doing when it comes to optimizing the data mart for somebody. All right, let's head back to our presentation and just wrap up now. So I'll just go back to our slides. Thank you, demo gods. You have looked after me today. Okay, so use cases for data marts right now. It's a preview feature. Please keep that in mind. This is still direct query and not import. Yeah, it's all direct query, I think, Donald. I think it's all direct query. Well, yeah, it imports it into the data mart though. So maybe it's import into the data mart, but then your models that look at a directory. Yeah, it'd be interesting to live feed it. We'd have to think about that. I think you think about it as import because it's on a scheduled refresh. It might be, you might have both options. I haven't looked at that actually. Departmental self-service data, centralized small to moderate. So this is from Microsoft, or this is the Microsoft data mart use cases. We'll talk about Greg's use cases in a second. So centralized small to moderate data volume, 100 gig in a self-service, fully managed SQL database. Fantastic. That's my use case, right? I've got a department that needs their own SQL and they want to just go with it, but it's all for analytics and they don't have a SQL person. You want to access data mart using external SQL clients. You want to access a data set using external SQL clients. then Datamarts are a great option. End-to-end semantic models, when you enable your Power BI people to create everything from ingestion all the way through, then your use case is kind of there for using Datamarts. This is Microsoft's version. Any real use cases right now? If you've got a weird data source that is complex to connect to, I think Datamarts are an interesting use case for that, right? So let's say you use an API, like an API-based cloud service, and it's got OAuth 2, and it's kind of complicated to get access to and all that kind of stuff. You need a specialist. You get your specialist in to set up the data mart, and then everybody else just uses SQL to access that data. I think that's a compelling kind of case for data marts right now. So weird data sources, definitely think about data marts. If you're heavily integrated with Power Platform, you're using Power Automate, Power Apps, and all that kind of stuff, you're kind of a Microsoft 365 shop, and you're using lots of Power Platform, and there's a lot of self-service stuff happening in that, then yes, Datamarts is definitely going to be in your radar for sure. You should look at Datamarts. If you've got a specific legacy system that you need to provide a lens on, this is similar to the weird data sources one, but I think that's an interesting kind of case as well, where you've got an older system that maybe you need to provide, just like throw that somewhere where people can easily access it. It's really all about if you're in an environment where you want people to just get SQL access to make it easier, let's make it easy, make it as people use most end user analytics scenarios, they want to either just use SQL or they want to use really easy to access tools, right? And Datamarts kind of makes it easy to access. It's integrated into the service. Or you want to provide that self-service data management to a particular department, or you've got a particular business process. That whole business process thing I still struggle with. I don't know if we shouldn't be talking about departmental BI as so much as business process-based BI. It's in preview though, so don't put it in production. That's not a good idea. The jury's still out on Datamarts, and we need to learn more before we can really do that. There's a bunch of links in the slides. I will share the slides with the guys, and you'll be able to see that. Some interesting people. Check out Mim's stuff on Twitter. He's loaded 1 billion rows into a data mart and is doing some stuff. So check out. So that's at MIM_DJO. Mim does some great work down here in Australia, and he's been doing a lot of analytics stuff. A lot of analysis of data marts and performance and things like that. There's a really good mechanics video on YouTube you can check out. There's the Microsoft documentation, all that kind of stuff. So really, in summary, data marts are a huge step forward in the Power BI self-service analytics story, but like all Microsoft products, it only suits a limited number of use cases. It's early days. Let's give it a chance. Let's see where it goes. I think it's really interesting. Let me know what you think in the chat. And I'd just like to say thanks. And you can find me at these places. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you around the traps. That's me.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Greg. Absolutely fantastic session there on Datamarts. Pragati, I'm sure you'll agree.
Yeah, I think I was literally into the session today because I was looking forward for someone to, give this session. And obviously, when it came to our user group, and I was like, oh, this is great. We'll get to learn something about data marts finally. So yeah, this has been amazing session, Greg. Literally, it was.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it's a fascinating topic. So yeah, I enjoyed putting this together. Yeah.
I think myself and Leon have got questions for you.
Yeah, definitely. So
Leon, I'll ask a question. Yeah.
That's okay. Just before we jump into that, for everybody tuning in today, please do take 15 seconds to fill out our anonymous feedback form. Let us know what type of webinars you'd like from us in the future, and also let us know how we're getting on as well. So please do take the time out for that, because as you've seen from today's session, we do listen to your feedback and bring you the material that you would like to hear. So with that being said, we do have some questions. So the Control E. Interesting. So the reason of Control E is because we can highlight code. Let me just change this view properly. So we can highlight code and just execute the select code. So very interesting that Microsoft haven't actually incorporated any of the standard keyboard shortcuts for execution. as of yet. So the question that I have, I'm just going to put it on the screen now, is does having a datamart and dataset in use double the storage? Can the dataset be deleted and the datamart still function?
Oh, I think they're intrinsically linked, is my understanding. So you wouldn't be able to delete it. Oh, I don't know if you could delete the data set. I'll try that right now in the background and I'll let you know. But I don't think so. I think the data set is an abstraction of the data on the data mart. So or maybe you could delete the data set and the data mart would still be there. Yeah, but I'll give it a try.
No problem at all. And Pragati, do you want to jump onto your question?
Yeah, so Greg, you showed us the query analysis view, right, where you were writing the query and you were getting the results. So I'm not sure if that's possible, but can we, save that our query output as a view within datamart?
That's my understanding of how it should work. Yeah, that's the piece that doesn't like that. When I look at, if you look in the mechanics video, they get it's saving the query as they're building it, and it doesn't save it for me at the moment. I'm not sure if that's a current bug in the system, but I think that would then present as a view, yeah, in our SQL side. So yeah,
So
that's
are
my
you saying
understanding of how it works.
you do a select star, but it will still save it as a view? Because generally in SQL, you'll create a view and then within that you'll write your internal query and then save it as a view, right? In the real world SQL. But here, just running the query will create a view, you mean?
Yeah, I think so. I think because it seems to be creating everything as a view. So
Yeah.
the other thing is, interestingly, on the SQL side, if you do a create view as and try to create a view, you don't have permission to do that. So there's no view creation permissions on the SQL side yet. So somewhere in there, someone's creating a view. But yeah, that's a key piece that I wanted to show, but I couldn't quite get to working. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly what's happening.
Yeah, because that will be pretty interesting. Like you can do some analysis, and if you feel like you need it as a view, and if you have that capability there, just run your query and have it as a view for your further analysis. So that will be a pretty interesting thing. But yeah, let's see how that goes.
Yeah.
Excellent. And just a note from Venkatesh, when we were going through the processes, so looking at the Kimball methodology and the Inman methodology as well, he mentions that his process is to use Excel files picked up by Python scripts and then do some data wrangling. Next is to run store procedures and put the cleansed data into a fact table, finally creating a data flow and use them as an input to Power BI visuals.
Yeah, and so I think that's a really common kind of scenario. Maybe not with the Python, but a lot of people are doing kind of data wrangling, and then they need a place to put it. And if you're using data flows, then you should be probably looking at data marts as well, because it kind of gives you that optimized SQL backend that you can kind of play with. So I think it's an interesting architecture for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Another comment coming in from Sasha Calderwood, and they mentioned that they have left the create data mart setting turned off because of the prompt. Does anyone know if there's a feature or that we can vote to make the data mart preview available for specific security groups?
Yeah, big sticking point with a lot of people. You can only turn it on for everyone or no one. There is no security group feature. People, for those of you who are familiar with Power BI Tips, they have their podcast, powerbi.tips. They were talking about that as a big miss from Microsoft, saying that you should be able to enable data marts for only specific departments, right? You only want certain departments to be able to access this.
Yeah, agreed. And Fernando did mention in the comments as well that Charles Webb had mentioned this morning with the Power BI guide that they have under reviewed a request to allow specific individuals to create data marts.
Yes.
Moving on to our next question from Venkatesh. They ask, can we say that a data mart does the job of SSIS, so SQL Server Integration Services, within Power BI service?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable. So I would say data flows maybe does the job of SSIS is more in line with that kind of idea. But yeah, it is. It's. I mean, it acts. There is an integration kind of piece to this, isn't there? You're building. You're extracting data. You're transforming it, and you're loading it. That's what SSIS does. So yeah, there's absolutely there's an argument to say that.
Fantastic. And then we just have some feedback for you as well, Greg. So Harry Smith 456 said that was great. Thank you very much. Fernando's giving you a very big round of applause. Mojo Dojo, or Mojo Jojo even, should I say. Great session, Greg. EMAC, applause, thank you so much. Sasha Calderwood, thanks very much. Ricky Romanek, a big round of applause again. And Donald has actually written applause this time round as opposed to the emoji. So you can see that everyone's really enjoyed today's session, Greg, ourselves included. We do have what looks like just one more comment coming in. I haven't read this fully yet. So Praveen mentions, can we share the subset of the data mart to the business users on their specified controlled scenario instead of exposing the full data mart model?
Can we share the subset of the data mart to the business users on the specified instead of the full data mart model? I think, well, you do that through row level security. I don't know. So the row level security is applied on the data set and the SQL side, right? So that's something that, so if you're doing SQL queries directly to the SQL side, row level security is still going to apply. If you're sharing a subset of the data mart to business users, you probably build a data, like a Power BI data set, a golden data set that sits on top of that data mart and then brings only those pieces in. If you wanted to, really restrict it that way as well, you could do it that way as well.
Excellent. And then just a final couple of comments coming in. Vicky with the applause emoji, and Venkatesh saying, thanks a lot, Greg, Leon and Pragati, for an interactive session. So with that being said, Greg, like I say, really thank you very much for today's session. Pragati, let's go ahead and close out for today. As I mentioned, please, everyone, do leave us that feedback. It's very valuable in terms of how we progress forward with webinars, type of information we bring to you, and also keeps us on our toes on how we can continue to make the Microsoft Power BI UK user group bigger and better.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming to the session, because this is something we just got from one of the feedback in the last time, and someone just wrote like they really need something on Datamart, so we brought to you that. So please give that feedback, because that will just enable us to bring the right content to you, and yeah, keep following us and keep attending our sessions.
Exactly. And thank you, everybody. Like I say, today's session has been brought to you in association with Pomerol. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you've been here with us at the Microsoft Power BI UK user group. Please don't forget to join us next week, where we'll be joined by Rishi Sapra, who's going to give us an end-to-end big data analytics journey on the Synapse all the way through to Power BI on, I believe it's going to be the NYC taxi data set, so the 1 billion or 2 billion rows worth of data.
Definitely.
Excellent. Thanks again, everybody. Stay safe.
Thanks everyone. Bye. Take care.